We're now living in a time when people play a little fast and loose with other people's art, but we're also living in a time when the internet has made it a lot easier, a lot harder to get away with it. What happened this week with some stolen video game art?
It was interesting. I got some news today that some advertising group had taken a video game logo and made it their own to sell something. And I thought, wait, I just saw this story. There's been 3 of these this week. It began early this week with there's a game, Firewatch. It's another little independent game, about $20. It's very beautiful. You're in a Utah styled national park. So it's all beautiful oranges and purples. And the style looked so good that some Ford dealership in Massachusetts decided to steal its logo, its beautiful mountainside view, to advertise getting away from it all in a Ford Focus without asking for any attribution. The game developers were told about this on Twitter and remarked on it, saying this is pretty terrible. And that was followed by a Chinese hockey team. By the way, in case you were wondering, yes, China has hockey teams now. A team out of Beijing called Kunlun Red Star, which is part of the KHL, the Continental Hockey League, which appears to be mostly Eastern European, a lot of Russians. And they announced the first Chinese professional hockey team. And its logo, as we see here on the screen, is right next to a game, Guild Wars 2, has a big dragon that's in the shape of a 2. And so someone on Reddit noticed this, saying, wow, Guild Wars 2 sure has a hockey team now. How weird. There's so many similarities between these logos. It's hilarious. Just very specific ways where the spikes and the marks couldn't have just been copied by hand. There's certainly some photoshopping done to stretch it out and make it quote unquote unique, but the similarities are uncanny. And especially for a company that is clearly going to sell this logo on t-shirts and put it on stadiums and have it be part of corporate branding, it just seems sort of foolish for a company like that not to spend, I don't know, $1,000 to get a freelance guy to come up with a different dragon. And then the third example of this week was that there was a hotel, the Hotel Figueroa in Los Angeles, lifted an image from a Grand Theft Auto 5 fan site of the game Grand Theft Auto and tried to pass the image off as Los Angeles, which is going to show that video games now look incredibly realistic, so much so that a lazy hotel intern couldn't bother trying to figure out whether the photo was of a video game or of Los Angeles itself. That photo was busted by Eurogamer and then promptly taken down by the hotel with nary an apology. It's just interesting because this is 3 examples of copyright infringement that they show that there was the syndrome that the guy called infinite free content syndrome, was what one of the Firewatch developers said, because he said, okay, the story gets revolved. It's a cute blip in the headline game real quick. But this happens all the time if you make images on the internet, because people just see an image. They go to Google image search, especially for people who run blogs and news outlets. They'll type something in Google image search so they can have a fancy little image on their headline for all of their social medias and this and that. And they don't even attribute, they don't pay, and images get lifted and stolen. And I think it's a good reminder for people who create stuff that keep an eye out on your Reddit communities, because you may not have the time to be a lawyer and file DMCA takedown request on images, but your fans will keep you posted. And that's what happened in all these cases, that fans reached out and said, hey, game maker, I love your stuff. What happened here? So just more of the same. This is a story that will probably keep on going until somebody comes up with a much better reverse image search sort of system throughout the internet.
So is there... are they just being tried in the court of public opinion, these places, or are the artists trying to get recourse for their stolen art?
In these cases, these are all a range of small fry companies. I feel like this hockey team thing could be huge because of the sake of merchandise. ArenaNet, who makes the game Guild Wars, they have an agreement with a Chinese company to publish Guild Wars in China. So therefore, there could be China against China litigation. Normally, if somebody from China lifts a thing and rips you off, you're kind of screwed as an American. That's a crazy wormhole of legal work. But China v. China kind of law could actually play out in such a way that logo may have to change, or there may have to be a payout. That's hard to say because Chinese law is just bonkers. But for the most part, it's really the court of public opinion, because most people aren't going to hire a lawyer, especially for something like as small as an email advertisement for a Ford Focus. It's really hard to imagine someone going to a prolonged lawsuit about that killing your video game's ability to sell. But who knows? There really could be someone who decides, you know what? Like the guy who made Minecraft. He's so rich. Who knows if he's the kind who will be like, you can't do that. You just misappropriated my asset. I will burn through 2 years in court just out of spite. I could see some rich nerd doing that before long.
Well, it strikes me that it's been a while that it's been relatively easy for people to find any image on the internet, but it's getting easier and easier to find out someone that's using that image, and I think that I'm not sure. I know for my children, I don't think they're being taught. What it means to have your own image. Like, I think that what the speed at which the ease at which it is to find images on the internet, the way we're introducing technology into the classroom, I don't think the knowledge of copyright is really keeping up with that. I think the kids are, I think it's a parent's responsibility, and I think to tell your kids, "Hey, actually, you can't just steal that and put it on your own work. It's not something that you're born knowing necessarily, and it's not something that is being taught. So,
Oh yeah, well, the internet, the speed of the internet and ethics education, at least in the United States, are not matched up. I've taught new media journalism to kids, and I find it's very important to stress the things that you can't do just because you can. It's a click away. Anything about plagiarism, I think, is just on the rise as a result. Kids just go onto Wikipedia and like, well, that's my homework. Those sorts of things. So that's a conversation that is going to grow, and hopefully public education gets on top of that, because that's a thing that gets reinforced in the way you create. You become a creative person in some sense in the educational system. You become a worker through the educational system, and so therefore you develop ethical responsibility, I think, in that sense. So there's parents, there's public school, there's public outreach. This is the kind of story that I think is going to that's going to be big for the next 5-10 years, as we all sort of feel out the rights that we do have and the rights that we think we have.
well, it's also about ownership as well. I mean, when we don't own the music that we stream on Spotify or Apple Music, but they're not. My kids are not listening to it illegally anymore. It's perfectly legal, but they don't own it. But so it's they have a different idea of what ownership is, and
Oh man.
you have to explain that to people. As
Oh,
well,
digital ownership! What a tangled web you weave.
exactly.